So let's begin with our first question. What traits or characteristics do you feel a member of Congress should possess, and what, in your background, makes you suitable for the position?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Virginia Fuller. First, want to take a quick moment to say I apologize for having gotten lost to getting here late. I think honesty is the best trait that we should find in any member in Congress and in government in general. We constituents and voters are basically tired of being lied to. We're being deceived. Bills are being introduced that the members of Congress haven't read, or that they haven't clearly explained. I hear people indicating that they have a hard time hearing me. I'm trying my best to speak louder. So if you can't hear me, just let me know, and I'll try even harder. So yeah, I think the fact that we are not being honestly told what the details are in a bill when introduced is a disservice to the constituents. And I'm hoping to get into office with that kind of integrity. The fact that one can always count on me being fair, being objective, and being trustworthy. I think that is the main thing that we are lacking in Congress. It doesn't matter how much education you have. If you're in office and you are, if you are dishonest, you're still not serving your constituents. Thank you.
Congressman Miller.
Well, thank you. I think that if you look at my record in serving the people of Contra Costa County in the Congress of the United States, you'll see a record of integrity, of honesty, of success, of hard work. I get up in the morning every day and go to work on behalf of the people that I represent in this congressional district, mainly Contra Costa County. And I do so on behalf of students and families trying to put their kids through school, and small businesses and workers and people looking for jobs, and make every effort to make sure that we can provide the opportunity to all of our citizens that America presents to them. And that is the opportunity to be successful. That is the opportunity to have economic mobility, to start at one place on the great ladder of success in America and perhaps end up in another place, to be able to move into the middle class, to be able to move out of the middle class in terms of going upwards, as opposed to what's happened during this economic downturn where people have fallen out of the middle class. And I think it's very important that the government has a very fundamental and central role to play in terms of the security of America's families, America's workers and young people. And a lot of that has to do with our reinvestment in this country, to reinvest in the education system, to make sure that the education that we present to our young people is in fact world class. It's not today, but we have opportunities to do that. Under President Obama's race to the top, where there are now school districts all across the country and states are adopting, based upon work done by the governors, not work in Washington, D.C., to make sure that, in fact, these are internationally benchmarked standards and assessments, so that our children are competing the same as people in high-performing countries like Finland, Germany, Japan, the cities of Shanghai, and make sure that they are ready for a world competition by reinvesting in our basic social security systems of Social Security and protecting Medicare.
So when considering a piece of legislation, what underlying principles govern, or in Ms. Fuller's case, would govern your decision on how to vote on any particular piece of legislation?
Well, I think it's kind of a dual one. This is a long historic argument in American politics, and that is, do you simply do what the polls tell you to do in your district, if you have polls in a local district, or do you use your best judgment? I believe that my obligation, and the way I've conducted myself in a career in Congress, is to come home, explain legislation to the people I represent, to answer the questions, to put myself forth, to take their judgments into consideration, and then to do my homework and try and decide what's best for the country, what's best for the economy, depending upon the legislation, and then cast my vote and be willing to come home and explain my vote. That's why I have town hall meetings in every community in my district on all of the time, including town hall meetings in high schools and community college systems here and the college system here in Contra Costa County to present myself. If I have that kind of transparency, I think I have the ability to then make sound judgments. And sometimes, though, that will not coincide with maybe the popular view. I wasn't elected to go there to be popular. I was elected to go there and do the best job that I could possibly do. And that requires a great deal of due diligence with respect to understanding issues, whether they're issues of international relations, whether issues of the economy, issues of education, the issues of small businesses, our tax system. It's very important that you do that kind of due diligence. And I think that's what works best for me. And I think my record shows that.
Ms. Fuller.
If I understand your question correctly.
What underlying principles would govern how you would vote on legislation that was presented to your office?
I believe we are a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. When you run for office, you run on a certain platform, and if you get elected into office, you know that the majority of your constituents want you to vote a certain way. And though you will be responsive to questions and inquiries from people that may not have voted for you, your first responsibility is to the majority of your constituents. For instance, with the health care bill, the majority of people did not want Obamacare as Mr. Miller explained it, as Mr. Miller ordered it and signed it. We know, and Mr. Miller agreed last time that we had a debate, that had he known that Obamacare has the certain things that I have outlined that the people did not know of when he signed the bill, he says he would not have signed it. And I want to again enumerate things that most of the public is not aware that is in Obamacare. For one, about 1,500 agencies are exempt. Two, certain religion such as Islam is also exempt, while we, as myself, I'm a Roman Catholic, we are fined if we don't comply with the regulations as it's spelled in Obamacare. And I'll go into another time when I have more time. Thank you.
All right. Next question, Ms. Fuller. If they're elected to office, have you agreed to any pledges to bind your hands on certain legislation? And what is your opinion on the pledges that politicians are being asked to sign, such as don't raise taxes or voting on certain bills in a certain method?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember which one I signed, but if somebody offered me to sign a pledge for not raising taxes, I would definitely sign that, only because we are paying more taxes than the economy can afford. Higher taxes only reduce the productivity of everybody, not just people in business, but also the wage earners. If the more taxes we pay, the less money we have for our own expenditures. Another thing is the government is wasting too much of our money. They're spending too much money on things that are not required to do according to the U.S. Constitution. We do not have to fund terrorist countries and build nations overseas. It's not in our Constitution. Right now we have 4 wars going since Obama took office, and Mr. Miller signed to continue financial aid to those very same countries that are now no longer considered in America's best interest or friends of America. We know that in Egypt now we have the members of the Muslim Brotherhood that are in power, and yet we are going to send our hard-earned money over to them. And these are the very same people that will also turn around, like they now have done in Libya. We have not only given them funds, we also gave them weapons. They turned around and murdered our ambassadors and 3 other Americans. Our government wasn't there to protect them.
Congressman Miller.
I don't sign pledges. People ask me to take a position on their positions. I explain my position on their positions. The pledge you take is on the opening day of the Congress. You stand and you raise your right hand and you pledge to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And not everything that the government does is in the Constitution. The highway system is not in the Constitution. The education system is not in the Constitution. The Medicare system is not in the Constitution. Social Security system is not in the Constitution. You want to be a strict constructionist? That's fine, but that's a very different American society with very different economic hazards for most of the middle class in this country, and certainly for the elderly. I would also say that what I said was, if your misrepresentations about Obamacare were true, I would have voted against it, but they're not true. They're not true. Members of Congress are included in Obamacare, okay? Believe me, I know, okay? Because I'm looking, in 2014, I will be signing up for it.
There are exemptions in there.
They're not exemptions for members of Congress, okay? And you keep wanting to talk about Obamacare, and you talk about it, as you see, on bumper strips, not as the actual bill, as we can get into that later. But the pledge that you uphold is to the Constitution, and it's your obligation to come and explain that to the people that you represent on an ongoing basis, so they understand where you're going and you're not going, and what they can decide to support you or oppose you, however it is. That's democracy. It's not neat, it's not tied up with a bow. It's a very messy system, but it requires transparency and openness.
Thank you, Congressman Miller. As of midnight, December 31st, 2012, the Budget Control Act of 2011, which is commonly referred to as the fiscal cliff, will go into effect. What is your position on the legislation that was enacted by Congress, and what, if anything, should Congress do to address the fiscal cliff?
I think clearly that the fiscal cliff ought to be avoided. I voted for the sequester package so that if we couldn't come to agreement on a budget deal, we'd have 50% cuts in domestic and 50% cuts in the military. I think that is obviously, that passed overwhelmingly on a bipartisan basis in the Congress. That now has focused the mind of people who thought they could just jump off the fiscal cliff and take the nation with them. Now we see all of these negotiations taking place in the Congress. I think after the election, people are going to come to understand that what President Obama put on the table with Speaker Boehner, the leader of the House Republicans, to do a $5 trillion deal over 20 years, to get the glide path on the deficit to start gliding down as it should, not continuing up, that's a much better deal and a much easier deal to do in this country than it is all these small little jerkmeyer deals that we do for 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, back and forth, and that's what they call uncertainty. We've got to send a long-term message, and I think that's quite possible. That's going to take comprehensive tax reform, and that's going to take comprehensive spending reform to get to that point. But it's really the path that we should follow. It was agreed to for one fine, quick moment, and the minute it became public, people walked away from the deal, unfortunately. And hopefully now, when the elections are behind us, we'll be able to do that for the good of the country and the good of the country's economy.
Ms. Fuller.
I strongly believe in a reduction of federal government. One of the obligations that Mr. Miller referred to is taking the oath of office and upholding the Constitution. Our Constitution requires that Congress and the Senate passes a fiscal bill every year for running our country. Ever since Mr. Obama has taken office, there hasn't been a budget presented, not through the Congress, when the Democrats had total control over both houses, and since the Republicans have taken over in 2010, the budget that they have presented got tabled in the Senate. So they're operating without a budget. That would have been something that both Mr. Miller and the congressional Democrats should have taken care of when they had total control over. It wasn't a matter of, the Republicans blocked us. I am in favor of the fair tax. The fair tax plan would eliminate the burden on small businesses. It stimulates productivity. You don't work for the government. You pay a consumption tax for new products, and it therefore would stimulate jobs. It would stimulate businesses and reduce our deficit as well.